I could have had a longer, sit down with my younger self, I think I could have shared some of that. Like, business isn't a dirty word. It doesn't mean you don't care about people. It's a way to organize the way that you care about people in the world. And it's a way to make sure that you're not just you're not burnt out, but that you don't have to stop and think, oh, I should have taken that job where I would be depressed and hate myself the rest of my life, because then at least I'd be able to afford the things that really, support my family. Like, there's some dichotomies in there and the ways that I think I was thinking about business. And
this is Rebel Therapist, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are trained as therapists and who want to level up their businesses, make a bigger impact, feel fulfilled, and be very well paid. I'm your host, Annie Schusler. This week, I'm talking to Lisa Danylchuk, founder of the Center for Yoga and Trauma Recovery. She's an author, psychotherapist, yoga teacher trainer, and entrepreneur. You're going to hear how Lisa's business has developed organically from her drive to see the movement of yoga for trauma help more people. There's a lot we can learn from listening to how she went from leading in-person trainings and presenting at conferences all the way to creating her online training program. She'll also talk about why she created in-person retreats all around the world. Listen in particular to how Lisa leaned into the value of persistence. I think persistence is one of the most important and perhaps one of the most underrated keys to success in your business. Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for being here.
hello, thanks for having me.
So I want to jump into talking about some different aspects of your business. And your business is really fascinating to me. So you're a leader, you help people incorporate yoga into trauma treatment. Mm-hmm. And can you just tell us a little bit about why is this such an important movement to you?
Yeah, I love that you're asking me this, because I ask people this all the time. Why yoga and trauma? Like, what led you to be living in this small but growing world that brings the two together? And for me, it was a very personal and professional journey, and it just sort of happened and evolved in my own life. I was studying fitness at first, and then got into yoga and started going the yoga way more than the fitness way. And I was studying psychology and interpersonal, just about a lot about relationships. And then started kind of getting pulled more in that direction and interested in trauma. And in the thick of that, of course, my own life is happening. And when I was in college, lost a brother really suddenly, really traumatically. And so in that moment, yoga became really everything, and the service work I was doing became everything. And I had such a full palette. I mean, like you said, there's a lot going on in my business now. This has just been the way I've been as a person my whole life, that I get excited and I take on a lot of things. So even some of the things that were good and I still like I was leading outdoor trips in college, they just kind of fell away. And yoga became a central focus. I was doing it pretty much every day, going to a studio in Santa Monica. I was in Southern California at the time, and teaching to these kids from Watts, a neighborhood in Los Angeles, was the other central thing. And I didn't really know why at the time, but the little sort of researcher part of my brain never 100% turned off. And it was like, I'm going to come back to this, and I'm going to try to understand, why are these the big things? And even like I mentioned, the outdoor trips, nature is still and has always been a big part of my life. But I was like, well, why didn't I just go run off into the woods and meditate? Why did I end up actually going to studios and developing deeper relationships with teachers and teaching these people and mentoring and developing deeper relationships with them? So you can see relationships become a key piece too. So that was really, my why is it's just how I evolved and how I grew, and I just kept getting more curious about certain things as a result of my studies and as a result of my personal experiences in life. And so yoga really stood out. Trauma explained a lot of what I was seeing in the kids that I was working with, more so than the other, list of diagnoses that were kind of slapped in their files. So as I started making those connections, I often describe it like two railroad tracks, and there's like the yoga side and there's the therapy therapy side. And then every time I do another training, I'm like, oh, they connect, they connect, they connect. And then I just started wanting to tell people that, hey, everybody, they connect. So that's where I am now.
And you kind of came at it first from the yoga side of the tracks. Is that right?
Not necessarily, because I actually grew up in a family with two therapists. My mom works with dissociative identity disorder and has my whole life. And my father was an LMFT, same license I have, and worked largely with couples, so a lot of relational work. So, I joke a lot because there's a ton of therapy phrases that will just get under my skin like no other, because my parents would say them. Like, I joke a lot. My dad said once to me, I was probably like 12. He said, Lisa, how would you feel about washing the car? Dad, I don't think I'd feel too good about it. He was like, do it anyway. So there's certain, therapy isms that, and I never wanted to be a therapist. It was never like a professional goal of my own. But what happened was I grew up going to conferences with my mom, and I would like sit in the safe room with all the stuffed animals and the people with DID who had been triggered. And, they used to call it multiple personality disorder. And so I started learning about that from a really young age. So it's hard to say what started when, because even though I didn't start yoga till college, I was really interested in like movement and physicality and fitness. And I've always been a runner, and
it all has been developing all at the same time. That's really cool.
It really feels like these two sides of one thing, right? Like when I look at it, they connect so much that it does feel like, a railroad track it doesn't exist without the other side, right? There's nowhere for the train to go. So I can trace back both of them pretty far, but there was this kind of cohesive shift happening when I was in college. I definitely saw it more clearly. And then, in retrospect, hindsight, you look back and you go, oh, right. And it all makes more sense.
It all fits together. Yeah. Yeah. And so how did it develop for you that now you've got a course where you're helping people to understand how to bring those things together and how to help with trauma using yoga? And absolutely correct me if I'm not saying that right. But tell us about how that course came into being. Did you start with one-on-one consultations and wanting to teach other people this, and then it developed, or did the course start off on its own?
Again, I can kind of trace back. I would say when I was in graduate school, I remember introducing myself and saying, like, if you see me doing a headstand in the library, like, it's strategic. I'm trying to get more blood to my brain. I'm trying to, please don't think I'm a weirdo. I was at Harvard, and I had all kinds of like assumptions of what that meant and what people would think. And, I actually had an amazing cohort and wonderful professors who weren't super yoga informed. They were like, okay. And there was a little bit of like, yeah, Lisa's doing headstand in the library, but there wasn't a sense of, I guess, judgment that I thought I might get with that. There was curiosity and acceptance. So a good modeling for a therapy program, right? Or a therapeutic program. But I would say even then, I just wanted to tell people, right, about yoga. So I would, take an opportunity in a class or in a group project, or I remember even, gifting yoga classes and shiatsu massages to my therapist, because I just wanted them to get this sort of complementary body energy work movement side. And soon after, I started applying to speak at conferences. And I remember the very early submissions I put out, people were like, no, we don't want to hear that. This is a professional trauma conference. We don't talk about
this is
yoga.
Rigorous.
Yeah. Exactly. That's a great word. So no, they didn't really want to hear it, but it didn't really bother me. I just kept like poking on their shoulder until I think the world evolved around it, the zeitgeist, if you will, or the culture evolved to start to be curious about yoga.
Well, and I'm getting that you were really persistent. You didn't give up when you heard people saying like, no, we don't want that. You kind of kept going because you knew deep down, this is actually really important.
I think I knew it was important. And I wrote about this. I read about this in my book that's coming out soon, that I felt when I went to yoga conferences like there was a big piece missing. And when I went to psychology conferences, that there was a big piece missing. And one of the biggest things at psychology conferences was we sat in chairs for like 3-5 days straight. And so I would be, again, the person in the back of the room, like in Upavishta Konasana, like sitting on the floor and just leaning forward and listening and moving around. And so I never felt, I haven't really thought of it that way, but I just always felt like you guys just don't know yet. Like, I hear that you're a little bit hesitant because new things always, we have some hesitance around. And I just saw it more as this integration that was happening, and I could kind of see evidence for things coming together. And so I never felt like, oh, they're never going to accept my proposal. I just kind of felt like this is important, and I really think it'll help you to understand it, and I really want to share it. So I'm just going to, maybe I'll reword it a little bit, or, oh yes, now there's a research study. I'm going to put the research study in my proposal, like randomized controlled trial, double blind, right? Like, use all the words and put it in and be like, yes, this is happening. So yeah, it only, in the course of even a couple of years, they went from sort of rejecting my proposals to accepting them to, within 5 years or so, like, hey, Lisa, can you talk about yoga at our next conference? And so that, I think on a personal level feels good. But it also, to me, was just evidence of this larger shift where the psychology world was really getting in touch with how important the body is in healing, and also in the way it responds to trauma and the way we can kind of store memories. And then the yoga world was learning, oh, whoa, we've got some powerful stuff here. There's a lot coming up. What do we do with it? What is this? Oh, we should study trauma informed. Oh yeah, let's do that, right? So there's this like curiosity and excitement starting to build in the yoga world, this, oh, how do we safely incorporate the body questions in the therapy world? So I could just see it coming closer and closer.
Yeah, I just got an image of like, you're kind of standing up on a hill and you can see both of these groups and you can kind of see what's happening, and you're like, come on.
Come on, just dance with each other, stand by the tree and look at each other, but whatever. Acknowledge, right? Yeah, and I think there is a level of professionalism that is developing that involves the overlap of the two. And so that's where, the online course came around in 2015. I'd been teaching at conferences forever. I would say, hey, I'm in Florida, this March and this April. And then someone would be like, I live in Florida, but I'm gone that week. And so I kept having these experiences where people were like, oh, you're in New York, but I can't make it. And like, oh, you went here, but I live 10 hours from there. And so it felt like I was going around and just singing from the rooftops or the top of the hill, if you will. And then I still felt like I was missing people. And so I wanted to just have something that I could offer that no matter where people were, or if they were, new moms, or, that they could make it fit into their life and still kind of get in on the party. So that's when I started the online training. And I see this professional really need, because we need training when there's something new and it's evolving. And in addition to needing training and understanding, well, what is the research and what are best practices as we're understanding them now, we need to have, I think, that community and some opportunity to check ourselves, right? Because we can come from a personal place of, I've been through all this, I get it, I know, but what about other people? And what about, what are best practices? And am I just doing this because I think it's good? So I think there's an element of confidence that people start to develop too, when they can have an in-depth training and when they can get answers to questions. And sometimes the answer is like, we don't know this. We need to know that we don't know this yet. So, because then we can go out and answer that question with confidence and clarity and know that we're within our professional scope. I get a lot of questions about that, even for people who are licensed as therapists and, 500-hour yoga teachers. They're like, is this okay? Should I be saying this? Should I be doing this?
And sometimes I notice even people with the most experience have a lot of questions about scope and how to keep things ethical, which I think is great because it's kind of a sign like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. I'm curious, in your course, what kind of something you were just saying now about like acknowledging when we don't know, what kind of role do you take in your course? Like what kind of leadership do you feel comfortable with?
I love your questions. So one of the things I try to do in the course is actually model something that's trauma informed.
Mm.
So it's not a therapeutic course. It's not meant for people who are in the throes of trauma. It's a professional training for people who are yoga teachers, who are psychotherapists, psychologists. We've had some people in nursing, and usually people wear more than one hat, right? They're like, I'm a Reiki practitioner and a massage therapist and a licensed professional counselor, or they have like some mix. But sometimes we have people who are studio owners and are more in the yoga world, people who have maybe a psychotherapy clinic, they're more in that world. And the way that I try to lead, hold space in this course is to not tell people exactly what to do, but rather give them a lot of information and encourage them to self-reflect and encourage them to get to know the people they're serving and respond intelligently with all of that information in mind, which is much more difficult than always do this, never do that. And I know, some people who've come to my training have been to other trainings that say, always do this, never do that. And I think those are actually really helpful for people who are just starting out. I think the complexity gets a little overwhelming for people who are really new. So I have had some students who've gone through who are just finishing school or just finishing a 200-hour teacher training. And I think it can kind of peak up their anxiety to not have this really fixed structure. Yoga for trauma recovery in 10 sessions, session 1, session 2, session 3, they want and actually, so we're developing a curriculum to offer that and a sort of, if you're just beginning and you're super overwhelmed, don't touch anybody. If you are really having a lot of anxiety about whether or not to play music, just don't play music, right? So some of these things that are some rules I think that have developed in some sects of the yoga and trauma recovery community. There are some places who have developed these types of all or nothing policies. So I'll sort of reiterate that for people who are new. And so we have a lot of conversations around this. There's a live component group call of the course, so we have an opportunity to talk, which is nice. So I try to lead by being sort of trauma-informed myself, and in that way I mean letting people choose. Also, one of the things that influences this...
I just want to pause there for a second. Letting people choose. So you're bringing that into the training itself of really encouraging people to be in choice. That makes so much sense.
Which is a huge aspect, I think, of teaching yoga in a setting where you're addressing trauma recovery. Because think about it, who elects to go through trauma? It's not something we choose. It's usually something that sort of happens to us in our life. It's in some capacity out of our control. And so getting to know, particularly with your body, that you can choose and you can have a conversation around consent. Do you want that prop to touch your body? Do you want a person to touch your body? And if you're not sure, you can always just say, I don't know right now, so no, until I do know. So yeah, I try to model that.
Great. And your course, it sounds like you waited to create it until there was just such a need. And people were kind of asking, I want to get to work with you. And I'm not there when you're there. And how did you develop the curriculum itself? Because now in the course, I'm assuming you had a lot more time to spend with people and give them information than you would at something like a conference.
Well, I think it all sort of organically developed as well, because the first conference presentation I gave was a 90-minute, session where we did some theory, we reviewed some theory, some yoga philosophy, did a yoga practice. For many people at that conference, the yoga practice was new in that setting, at least. Maybe they had done some yoga, but they weren't used to, kind of awkward, should I bring yoga pants? Do I need a mat? But we did yoga at the conference. And then that would evolve into maybe a 120-minute workshop, and then a 4-hour workshop, and then a day long, and
Oh,
then
so you had some real time with people.
yeah. And I should mention too that while I was doing these workshops at psychology conferences, I was also teaching workshops at yoga studios. So I still felt like there was kind of one foot in each world, although they were definitely coming closer together with, therapists coming to the yoga studio and more yoga teachers starting to show up at the psychology conferences. But even at yoga studios, I mean, I've done a ton of not week long, weekend long, so 2-day, even 3-day workshops. So the online course it's 8 weeks long. It takes pieces of that and sort of spreads it out and gives an opportunity to go a little bit deeper. But the format and the curriculum really developed, I would even say, from that first workshop. And then you realize, oh, I've got to change this around, or, oh, we had that question, I'm going to add that in. And so it's really, at this point, over a decade of evolution of that. And it's funny, the name too, it's Y4T, Yoga for Trauma. That just because I had to start abbreviating it when I wrote it in my planner. I still have a written planner. And when I'd make files and stuff, I just got tired of writing out Yoga for Trauma. So that's like the evolution of the name, and everything came from just that long period of time. And often right after I would teach, I would go and just add all these notes for the next time, right? Just like really raw, add them into the slides I had and get more ideas based on the conversation. So I do want to credit like everyone who's ever come to any workshop I've given, because I think they definitely played a role in refining it and enriching it, and just, even rethinking things like, what do I say for, what's the order? Where do we start and where do we go from there?
Oh, that makes so much sense. Yeah, that happens to me when I'm leading something where I'll get a question where I'm like, oh, yeah, that would have made a lot more sense to explain before. And yeah, you just keep refining and refining. Yeah.
Especially if you're really steeped in something,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't even think to say, oh, the word yoga. Yeah, everybody knows that means union. No.
Mm.
And someone goes, wait, what did you say? Yoga means union? Oh yeah, did I not say that really clearly? Let me slow down. And as you can even see here, I get excited about this stuff. And so I can just like forever. And so having those opportunities to have people in front of me and have conversations and like chew on it was just really fun for me, but also, like I said, really enriching, because you start to notice your assumptions, your blind spots, some parts that can be triggering for people, and some of the ways that people respond to the information as you're presenting it. So yeah, all of that has informed the course as it is right now.
Mm.
And it'll continue to evolve.
How much interaction are you having with folks when they take the course?
So it used to be, right now I'm interviewing everyone before they go in, and there's a number of reasons for that. One really important reason is to make sure, and I can share this with all of your listeners, that when we go into a trauma training or a yoga training, yoga is involving so much of the body and the breath, and there's mental and emotional and energetic components to it, but oftentimes we'll go in, oh, I'm going to take this training, I'm going to develop my professional skills. And I don't think, as a group, I think maybe this happens a little more in the yoga world than in the therapy world, but in the therapy world in particular, we don't say, hey, I acknowledge you're a person, you have a personal history, and when we start talking about mental health and we start talking about the awful things that happen to people, you're going to think about the things that happen to you and the things that happen to your family and how they impact people. And that in and of itself, I would say that's the primary reason I still have an interview beforehand, because I'll tell people that, and I'll say, look, we don't go into really detailed traumatic narrative here. We're not going to watch videos of abuse. It's not that kind of training. But we talk about trauma and focus on trauma in the body and yoga for 8 weeks, 2 months of your life. So it's really important to know beforehand that there's kind of a trigger warning with that. Like, you might get triggered, and you probably will in some way. If you're aware of that, you're going to be so much better off than if it catches you off guard. right? So what we do in the interviews, we talk about self-care, we talk about timing, kind of figure out, like, is this the right fit? Is this program the right fit for you? Is the timing good for you based on a number of factors? And if not, I can always recommend other things to people. And sometimes that's a different training or it's a different timing. But I think it really helps to have that opportunity to have a personal connection first, even before you're sort of learning from this person that they've probably never met me in person, most of the people that come to the training. And like I said back in the beginning of our interview, it's like, oh, relationships may matter. So I do want people to know who go through the course that, like, I'm a human and I've done a lot of this personal work myself, and that I care, right? That this is actually what they want, and this is actually that they're informed. So it'll be ideally, an informative, enriching, healing sort of parallel process for them. Again, its focus is professional, but I don't want to just pretend like that other part isn't there. So that's how they get sort of one-on-one time with me. And then we have I mentioned we do a group call once a month, which either has a sort of office hours component, like, hey, what's going on? What do we want to talk about? Or we'll do a training component. And if we do a training component, like there's this new information I want to share, or a guest and someone who can sort of enrich their perspective or practices, then we'll record it and it sort of becomes part of the training. So there's this ongoing, continuing education piece of it.
Okay, so you're saying, so once a month, so does that mean they get 2 of those live calls when they go through the 8 weeks?
So they get to, well, right now we have a guaranteed access for a year of ongoing support calls. Yeah, and I think it helps build the community. Some people don't really want to speak up right away, and if you're in an online training, you don't have to sit in the back of the room to sort of hide out. You don't have to wait out the long awkward pauses while they're asking for questions. So yeah, to give people space and time to join in and chime in, and also just timing and life-wise. People are across time zones all around the world, and they're doing different things, working, teaching yoga classes. So yeah, we give a full year of support. And a lot of times the more difficult questions come up once you start putting things into practice, and that doesn't always happen right away. So, and really it's kind of ongoing support, but we guarantee a year just because the program structure, like I said, it's evolving, it might change. So that's why it's like guaranteed year. We're not going to like, you're out of here. Like, this is your 13th group call. Like, no, it's not that kind of community. But I do think the ongoing support is really helpful, again, because this stuff is popping up all over the world, and a lot of people feel pretty isolated or even lonely around it. So,
yeah, so that's something also that, it's really interesting, Lisa, because I do something similar in my program. We have an alum group and we have monthly calls. So you're just speaking my language.
Nice.
Because business brings up trauma too for people. It's really interesting. But we were talking before we started recording about how you also do retreats. And that one reason that you do these in-person retreats is to foster that community. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about that, about how the retreats, and I know when this goes live, you're actually going to be in the middle of a retreat in Maui.
Yay, I can't wait.
So how did that come to be?
Well, I started leading retreats early on. I can't remember what year my first retreat was, but just as a yoga teacher, I think I mentioned this to you earlier, they would just kind of fall in my lap. I really can't remember what my first retreat was, but I led a retreat in Tibet in 2009, which I happened upon because I was raising money for an orphanage in Cambodia, and my uncle got an email that I sent out and said, oh, you should talk to cousin Peggy. Peggy's a tour, been leading tours in Tibet, Bhutan, and Mongolia for 30 years. Peggy says, hey, you want to come to Tibet? I say yes, as I do. And I go to Tibet, and then she says, hey, do you want to bring a group back? I also say yes. And so we have this group in Tibet. Some of the people who are participating start talking about how they've always wanted to lead retreats. One of them has a property in Santa Barbara. One of them's training to be a natural food chef. A couple of us teach yoga. boom, next 4 years, we teach retreats.
This was a group of friends?
They were people I knew through yoga mostly, and yeah, so friends and colleagues that came to Tibet. So then, years of teaching Santa Barbara retreats. I've been teaching, I think this is my 5th retreat at Lumeria and Maui, which, would just bring yoga students from classes. But what's happened over the years is I think the retreats have gotten a little more focused on this community, the Y4T, the online training program. And so this retreat that I'll be on when most people are listening to this, I suppose, is people who've graduated from the online training program, people who did the pilot mentorship program I offered in 2017, and who some of them have already started building like pretty beautiful relationships with each other. And then there's some more people coming that they haven't met yet. So it's building out the in-person community. And that's a piece that's really important to me. And like I'll say in a lot of the interviews I do with people, like, I don't know what you're going through because we're not in a classroom. I can't read your nonverbals or your body language. I don't know how many times you left the room and came back like with tissues, right? So that's one of the hard things about online learning is we don't have that in-person, nonverbal and like energetic sort of vibe connection. I think we can get some of it, but we don't have the full 3D experience. And so, yeah, a big focus of the retreats now is just to get people to have an opportunity to come together and to be supported as, healers, counselors, teachers, leaders. I think particularly, there's like a timing thing where when the world is going through more intense things and when our clients and our students are more apt to be triggered, that puts a load on us as providers in addition to our own stuff. So this one in particular, I just felt a lot of people were reaching out like, how do I keep doing this? Like I can't. And so, like I said, I've been to Lumeria a number of times. I know it's a top-notch retreat center, and I just said, like, let's go. Let's gather and sort of bring all of our energy together. That's really supportive and positive and healing.
And it sounds like, as I was reading about the retreat, it sounds like there's a lot of space. So it's like gathering, but then not putting in more input, like having a lot of space to just let things go. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we basically do a long yoga practice in the morning. All meals are provided. We do a short meditation before dinner that's optional. And then there's a hammock forest and a hot tub and a pool and
a hammock forest.
Yes.
So that just means like, whoa, like a place with just a bunch of hammocks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Right. You just think about it and it gives you a little, things are right in the world if there's a hammock forest out there. So definitely intentional space. People are welcome to leave the retreat center if they want to go hike on Haleakala or down to the beach where the turtles come in. It's pretty easy to get around, but we've definitely had years where there are people who like their goal is to not leave the retreat center for 7 days. They're like, I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're at a retreat, do you find that you can get downtime, or do you find that you're kind of on more when you're, going through the process?
I think that I'm more on. It's always helpful to have the environment. I think the places I've led retreats, for the most part, the environment itself has sort of a healing impact. I'm just still in caretaker mode, right? So I'm still looking out for people. So I try to at least have, a day on each end or a little bit of time on each end. That's something that I've developed awareness of over time. I would say Lumeria, they do a great job taking care of people there. So I feel supported by the staff. I led a retreat in Bali where I was very much on because I felt like I had to do more. We were further away. It wasn't as familiar for people. Many people, it was their first time leaving the country. So that's a little more mama bearing, which I love. But it is important. Like when I led the retreat in Bali, I had really wanted to be there for the Day of Silence, which is their New Year. And so I was there for it, which was right after the retreat. And it's literally a day in Bali where there's no traffic. You're not really allowed, you're not supposed to leave your house unless there's like a medical emergency or something. So it's just a day of shh. That was huge for me there. So yeah, I definitely feel like people think, oh, yoga retreat and you're just off in paradise and you're not working. And I think anyone who has led a yoga retreat or retreats in general will attest to like, no, it's definitely still holding space for people. But there is this, like in Maui in particular, I feel like the land is on my side. I feel like the staff from the retreat center are holding space as well. And so that feels really nice.
I know I saw one comment that you make every person feel important. And so it sounds like that mama bear energy or whatever you're doing when you are with people is just giving them that feeling like you care about them.
Definitely. Yeah. And I do. I mean, just do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm really glad people are getting to hear about how you get to do both in your business. You get to work online with people so that you can serve people all over the place who you may never get to be in the same space with, but that you've also brought a very kind of high touch in-person aspect into your business too.
Yeah. And for so many reasons, the relational component's really important to me, and not ever to force it on people. I've had people go through the training that seem a little more, I think some of us would say like guarded or protected, and that's okay. Like you don't have to talk to me, but you can. And I think that's important. I also think in the yoga world, whether it's in retreats or in studios, like there can be a tendency, like people talk about the sort of like rock star status, where there's just like I don't know if it's like a power differential or inaccessibility or what it is, but I personally don't want to perpetuate like, oh, there are these other people out there that have it all together and I'm never going to be one of them. Like, I just don't want to perpetuate that. So I try not to.
Yeah. So Lisa, if you could time travel to the beginning of your business, what advice would you have for the Lisa of that time? One thing that's more big picture, maybe a mindset thing, and then one thing that's just a tactical piece of advice.
The first thing that comes to mind is, which I know what my younger self would have said, is I would have said, like, this is a business. Like, this is going to be your business and your life. And I would have been like, this is not a business. This is my heart. And this is just what I do because of everything. So I don't think I would have listened, to be honest. I wouldn't listen to my later self. But it would have been helpful to like set up a business checking account a little sooner, right? I think it's like embarrassingly slow how some of those business tactical sides have developed. So probably the answer to this question is like the big picture thing I would have said is like, honey, and I don't want to be diminutive to my younger self, but I would have been like, strong young woman, this is a business. This is a business. It is. Own it. Okay, it is a business. It's going to grow. Go get a business checking account right now, right? Oh, but I don't have, go get a business checking account without silencing my younger self. Go get a business checking account and I don't know, some other really basic, like hire an accountant probably, so you don't have to worry about that. So very basic, sort of simple supports and structures, I think.
Yeah. So the big picture advice and the tactical advice really fit together. Like, this is a business, and therefore, like, I want you to just take a few steps to get us set up well.
Because business isn't a dirty word, and I think at that point in my life, I felt like it was, and I felt like, well, I'm different from the people studying finance because they don't care about people. Well, maybe it was always this way or it's evolved, but business is actually a way to professionally take care of other people, right? It's a way to package and refine and communicate and share what's in your heart, right? And sure, there are people who are, selling ketchup with sawdust in it or whatever because they're just trying to. But that's not me. It's not ever going to be. But I think there is a movement and a growing sort of presence of people who are thriving based on their skills in healing or things of that nature. So, and I think it's important that we participate in the economy and that we feel that this type of work is valued and it's valuable. So I think if I could have had a longer, sit down with my younger self, I think I could have shared some of that. Like, business isn't a dirty word. It doesn't mean you don't care about people. It's a way to organize the way that you care about people in the world. And it's a way to make sure that you're not just you're not burnt out, but that you don't have to stop and think, oh, I should have taken that job where I would, be depressed and hate myself the rest of my life, because then at least I'd be able to afford the things that really, support my family. Like, there's some dichotomies in there and the ways that I think I was thinking about business. And it seemed to me like that was the whole worldview at that point in time. And it seems to me like that whole worldview has evolved. But again, that's from my limited perspective. But I see that a lot in people who, people I've mentored who are struggling financially. And it's like, I really want them, there's a level of rest, even in terms of your nervous system, that comes when you have food and you have your rent, and if your tire blows out, you can fix it and you're not going to have to go into this panic. Like, there's actually a correlation even between having a sustainable business and that rest and digest response, right? Because you could do all of the Supta Baddha Konasana with all the bolsters in the world for, all the hours in the month. But ultimately, if you're in Supta Baddha Konasana and you're like, I don't know, how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to pay my rent? Your nervous system's not going to be like, this is so healing.
Yeah. Right. Right. And if you're making good money, it allows you to take care of more people and help more people.
Absolutely. And do things like put a deposit on a retreat or something, right? Like, I think a lot of times we don't think about that sort of back end of healing businesses. Like, and it's interesting, I'm just putting this together, but I did have a business specialization when I was in undergrad that I ultimately dropped. I had 2 accounting classes left, but I went to them. I was trying to finish my 2 accounting classes among some other things that were more interesting to me. But it was literally months after my brother had died. And I couldn't. I was just like, everything takes more energy. Anyone who's been through trauma and loss knows, in the wake of that, everything seems to take more energy. And I just went to my advisor, who was such a sweetheart. And he just said, you don't have to, you have a major, you have a minor, you don't have to have, you have all the classes, you did it. You're right. I'm just going to let it go. So I think there was some part of me, I think, that had an awareness of business can be okay.
Mm-hmm. And that it was something that was going to be a big part of your future.
Yeah. And hire the accountant.
Yeah. Yes. I just met with mine this week. So liberating, so helpful.
Yes.
So what's the best place for people to learn more about you, check out your course, and throw compliments at you?
So my website is howwecanheal.com, and the online course is on there. So it's just howwecanheal.com/Y4T, the letter Y, the number 4, the letter T. That's probably the best place right now. The online course, we typically do it about 5 or 6 times a year. So there are enrollment periods and all the information is updated there. You can apply through the website. And yeah, I should actually post something about my book coming out, because it should be out by April this year.
Oh, exciting. What's it called?
It's called Yoga for Trauma Recovery, Theory, Philosophy, and Practice.
Excellent. Great. So I'll have all of that in the show notes so that people can follow you. Thank you, Lisa. This was such a pleasure.
Well, thank you for doing this and for supporting people in the way that you are. I mean, it's it's always great to connect with other people who are helping helpers and who are just kind of supporting healing in general in the world. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Lisa talked about her amazing retreat and how it makes room for connection and restorative practices. As we release this episode, she's in Maui, perhaps leading participants to a hammock forest or through a yoga practice. And it just so happens that I'm leading a retreat in April in Phoenicia, New York with my friend Rebecca Wong. It's called Signature Heart and Soul Business Retreat. It's a 4-day experience at a retreat center in the heart of the Catskill Mountains. We'll guide you through a process to hone your signature. And what we mean by signature is the work you're known for, your most important message, your unique contribution to the world. The retreat includes small group masterminding time with me and Rebecca, delicious meals, gentle yoga, downtime to enjoy the trails and spa services or just to rest, a bonfire, and more. And a spa service is included in your registration. After the retreat, we'll follow up with 6 monthly mastermind calls with Rebecca and me. This all happens from April 25th through 28th, so it's really right around the corner. To apply and register, go to rebeltherapist.me/signature-retreat. And if you can't write that down right now, don't worry, just head to rebeltherapist.me and you'll find the retreat under Work With Us. All right, I'll see you next time.
So